John shook his hand. He told Joe Biden, he said, the science you're using for energy and climate change is just wrong. And Joe Biden got angry. He says, you're just spouting right-wing science. So Joe Biden is lecturing the current Nobel laureate in physics about science.
My guest today is Gregory Wrightstone.
I'm a geologist, got a master's in geology from West Virginia University. I was co-author of the first comprehensive peer-reviewed study on the Marcellus Shale of the eastern United States, which turns out it's the largest natural gas field on Earth by far. And then in 2015, I started getting very interested in climate change. Some of the things we were being told, I knew as a geologist were just wrong. And so my first book, Inconvenient Facts, was really the result of my exploration for climate change truth. It flowed out of that. And the second book that I've just published just last week, A Very Convenient Warming, I've evolved, and the CO2 Coalition also has evolved from stating it's more than just there is no climate crisis. There isn't. But not only is there no climate crisis, by almost every metric we look at, Earth's ecosystems are thriving and prospering, and humanity is benefiting from warming and more CO2. And it's completely a stark contrast to what we hear every day in the media and what we're preached to by NOAA and NASA and the UN. They don't recognize the huge benefits that are accruing to humanity and the human conditions improving because of this. And the word I use a lot, Tom, is celebrate. We should celebrate the benefits that we're seeing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's great. I think your message is fantastic. Let's talk about the CO2 Coalition itself. That it was founded in 2015, right? And was it founded by Will Happer?
Yeah, Will Happer. At the very first meeting, there were a number of notables there. Roger Cohen, Will Happer. Actually, Mark Mills was part of that group. Alex Epstein, although he never ended up joining, being part of the continuing effort, but it was a young Alex Epstein at that time. Of course, he's not old now. So it's evolved. When I took over in the end of 2020, and Steve Malloy, who you know very well, when I took over, he told me, Greg, this is a diamond in the rough, because we had so many top scientists that were publishing. We were doing white papers, but I saw the real need here for. It doesn't do any good if you produce scientific, detailed white papers that very few people read. And so I wanted to combine the scientific merits of our scientists and really make it approachable and readable by the general non-scientific population. And we've done that. Actually, we've just seen explosive growth over the last 3 years from 2 employees when I started. We now have 11, because when I took over, I took a look and I had a lot of goals that I wanted to accomplish, but we couldn't do it with 2 employees. And so we've been gradually increasing our staff. It was a stressful time because there were so many things that we wanted to accomplish, but just didn't have the time to do it. And now, we've got 2 research and science associates in Vijay Jayaraj and Byron Sopoyan. Vijay's moved from India to Scotland. He's a prolific writer. He writes a lot about climate colonialism, and he's got a new book that I'm editing right now that will be coming out in the next couple of months. So it's been an exciting time for us. In fact, our donors have grown from we had 133 donors. We're now up over 8,600 donors. People are responding. These are individuals just like you and the people listening, and they're responding to our message. And that's why I'm able to hire these people. I'm looking for 2 more to do even more than what we're doing. People are just responding tremendously to our message and our outreach.
As I was just saying before we hit record, I spent some time this morning clicking around on the CO2 Coalition website, and I think us climate realists and everybody should spend more time doing that, because there's so much good content out there, just loaded with great content. Yeah,
and we're doing more. Last year we took on education as our education initiative, and launched that. We have 15 people on this committee, most of them PhDs. And what these people have done is amazing. They've put together just wonderful comic books. I brought on to staff. We have a full-time artist that Tiago Hellinger that lives in Brazil. He's wonderful. So the books are done manga style. The videos he's creating are anime, and they're fun and entertaining, but they're also teaching science. And we've also, to go along with them, Dr. Sharon Camp, again, another employee. She's our senior education advisor. She's got a PhD in analytic chemistry, and she does the lesson plans for us. That's a new initiative. We just signed a contract for a series of 25 videos that'll be fairly short, on the 3 to 4 minute range. We're calling it the Climate Chronicles, and you can go on the website and find the Climate Chronicles. The very first one we have up there is on heat waves, very professionally done by one of our members. It's a company formed by one of our members, Mike Thompson. His partner is actually a 14-time Emmy nominated producer of films. He's won 7 Emmys. These are high quality professional videos. And we're going to have a whole series of these. We've signed a contract to do the first 5 of 25 videos. So we're continually expanding our reach, expanding our outreach. And it's been quite an honor leading this organization. I feel motivated every day. And come in here and our staff is pumped up and they're ready to go, because they come to me and they say, I love working here. We're doing something good for the planet. We're actually making a difference. And it's hard to find a job like that, that you not only enjoy, but you're making a difference. And so it's been quite a wild ride for the last 3 years.
One addition since the last time you were on this podcast is you got John Clauser on your board of directors, right? Do you want to talk about him a bit?
Yeah, John was he was brought to our attention from Dr. James Emstrom from California, who's probably the top scientist dealing with PM 2.5, and that's particulate matter less than 2.5 microns, and he conclusively states it's not a problem, it's not dangerous, and they're trying to overregulate just about everything. And he introduced us to John Clauser, who was he was honored with the Nobel Prize last year, earlier in March of this year. He received the prize, and then he was honored. This is in physics, by the way. It was on the research on was called quantum entanglement. It's Einstein called it spooky reactions at a distance. And Einstein, it turned out that John Clauser was right and Albert Einstein was wrong in this regard. And John Clauser proved it. And John was invited to the White House, I believe in May of this year. And afterwards, Joe Biden honored him. Afterwards, John shook his hand. He told Joe Biden, he said, the science you're using for energy and climate change is just wrong. And Joe Biden got angry. He says, you're just spouting right-wing science. So Joe Biden is lecturing the current Nobel laureate in physics about science. I'm not sure how that ends up, but he's unafraid. He went to the Korea Quantum Physics Conference not long after that. He stated loudly and proudly that there is no climate crisis. I've been in contact with him. He's putting a presentation together, and I think you'll be invited to it. It'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks, where we get an all-members meeting of the coalition members. We're now more than 150 members, all of them esteemed scientists or notable climate skeptics like yourself. And so we'll be having that. It's kind of a neat Zoom call where you have all these world-renowned experts from around the world. Peter Ridd, on top Great Barrier Reef expert, John Clauser, Nobel laureate in physics, Will Happer again, emeritus professor of physics from Princeton. We got quite the brain power when we have an all CO2 coalition members meeting.
I do think it's pretty funny that, like on Twitter, you constantly hear that it's basic physics and so simple that a child can understand it. I think Michael Mann may have even said that a monkey could understand it. There's some quote about that. Completely crazy.
Yeah, it's in my book, I took a formula that was in one of the papers by William Wingard and Happel. It's about yay long. It's got symbols that I have no idea what they mean, and you can't. It was this long. And it was on the physics of warming and interaction. And I just said, I admitted I have no idea about watts per meter squared. I'm a geologist. I rely on people I trust that know physics, like Will Happer, Richard Lindzen, Steve Koonin, the true physicist, John Clauser. And I trust what they're telling me is right. And what they tell me is that the warming effect of CO2, equilibrium climate sensitivity, that is, how much warming can we expect? It's called ECS. How much warming can we expect for a doubling of CO2? So today we're at 420 parts per million is the ambient CO2 levels in the atmosphere, which is 50% more than it was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, but we're 420 today. What warming can we expect if we double CO2 from 420 to 840? According to the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, of which, just, oh, by the way, I was accepted as an expert reviewer for the last one, the AR6, but they'll tell you it's somewhere around, if we double CO2, it'll be maybe 4.5 degrees Celsius of warming, which is quite a bit of warming. The physicists here that I trust tell me it's definitely less than 1.5 and quite likely less than 1.0 Celsius of warming for a doubling of CO2. And what we've seen, what the facts tell us is we've seen nothing but benefits from the combination of warming and more CO2. By almost every metric we look at, we said before, ecosystems are thriving and prospering, and humanity is benefiting.
Yeah, I think your book makes a good point of that we're not guessing about, oh, is warmer better or not, because you go in great detail looking back at history. We've had a lot of cold periods. We've had a lot of warm periods, and we know how humans did in those periods, and the warmer was better every time so far, correct?
Oh, it was. And that's one of the things I just love is talking about the strong relationship between human history and climate history. And we find, just like you say, these really warm periods, and bear in mind, they used to be called climate optima by people that studied these things. They don't use that terminology before. They called them climate optima because life was good, food was bountiful, ecosystems thrived. But you can't call warm periods optima if you want to try and convince people that warmer is horrific and colder is better. And what's interesting too, what I liked was Michael Mann was once asked, what's the ideal temperature for planet Earth? And he said, well, that's easy. It was the temperatures before we started adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. That would have been, well, it would put us squarely in the middle of the horrific little ice age. And this was a period, perhaps a third of the population of the Earth perished during that time. Half the population of Iceland perished. In fact, the Danish authorities who controlled Iceland at that time proposed actually abandoning the entire island nation and bringing them back. And they almost did. It was seriously, because it was so bad. Crops were failing. The volcano Hekla it devastated parts of Iceland. And it also led to worldwide famines. The big volcanoes in Iceland, when 3 times they've gone off in the last several thousand years. And each time it affected global agriculture production significantly and for the worse. So Michael Mann tells us that's the temperature that would be best for Earth, but it just wasn't, it's just not so. I mean, they did witch hunts in New England and in Europe during that time because they blamed weather causing witches for terrible crop harvest. And they need, just like today, when something's going wrong, you look around for somebody to blame. And because, if the guy in front of you stops too suddenly in your car and you don't see it, you'll slam into, you're blaming on the guy in front of you with your car when it's actually your fault. Or maybe there's nobody's fault for this when we have this cold period. But nonetheless, we saw that the cold of the Little Ice Age was associated with, again, crop failure, famine, and pestilence. And it was not a very good time. Also, we can look at what's more dangerous, cold or heat. The largest study of its kind was Antonio Gasparini. He looked at 74 million temperature-related deaths, and he found that 20 times as many people die due to cold as due to heat. Another study was 15 times as many. Nonetheless, it's a lot more people died because of cold-related as to heat-related deaths. And I also, as a scientist, I found it fascinating. The most recent study that was done, it concluded there were 10 times as many people killed due to cold as due to heat. But what they found in this study too, which I thought was fascinating, it turns out that heat-related deaths, that heat waves seem to, they call it a culling effect, that it's those that are almost ready to die succumb easily to heat. It's not so with cold. And so actually there was what they called a mortality window several months after a heat wave where it claimed people. And so actually mortality, what we had was people died during the heat wave because of the heat that would have likely died over the next several months. And so actually there was a drop in mortality after the heat wave. And I found I found that fascinating. You don't see that with the cold related deaths because cold it seems to be an equal opportunity grim reaper. So the cold brings, and of course, in the COVID era, we know that cold is associated with things like COVID, influenza, and we saw that in the other periods, the Dark Ages and the Little Ice Age, with during the cold, diseases like the plague and the Black Death and other things thrived because it was cold and people gathered together in their homes and cabins.
So one point you made in your book that I think is an important one about those witch trials back in the Salem days or whatever, that it was Harvard-educated people. A lot of people educated at Harvard, the elites, they believed in the witch thing. That's amazing. I think history is repeating here that a lot of educated people believe in this scam, and ordinary people are harder to fool.
It is. And Will Happer likes to point that out as well. Will is our chairman. The physicist I lean on most. And he points that out. And he also likes to do like I did, was we associate the witch hunts of the Little Ice Age, to what are the witch hunts that are going on now. They're saying that we're being punished, if you'll forgive me, by our sins of emission of CO2, and it's leading to horrible death, crop failure, increasing heat waves, expanding deserts. We could go on, but that's just not true. We find these things that they're telling us that are getting worse are actually getting better. And we find that the deserts are actually shrinking. The Sahara Desert, 200,000 square kilometers of the Sahel, the southern Sahara, have turned from desert into lush grassland and farmland. We're seeing that globally fires are in decline, not expanding. Even in Canada, there was a bad fire season in Canada this spring. It happened to blow the smoke across the United States. These things occur every single year in Canada, and they start in the late spring, which is a little bit different from our Western fires that are typically in late summer and early fall, where it's the dry heat that drives them out. But in Canada, it's the snow melt that exposes all the grasses and dries them out. And it's the top fire season in Canada is actually in May, which I found to be interesting. And the Canadian Fire Service actually documents looking over 40 years of data, that fires are in decline in Canada. They're not increasing. And so this is, again, I like when you look dispassionately at the science, they always say follow the science, but that's not what the Biden administration's doing. That's not what people pushing net zero are doing. In fact, you'll be interested. I'll be traveling to Wyoming. I'll be traveling there in 2 weeks with Dr. Happer and Dr. Byron Sepoyan is our science and research associate. I'm just right now gotten the edits back. We've got an extensive report on Wyoming and climate. And we took a look at the cowboy state and what's actually going on. This is part of our ongoing regional and state studies. Montana will be next, followed by Texas. We've already done Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the Midwest. But we find it's really, really interesting that there's been has there been an increase in temperature in Wyoming? Yes, about 1.2 degrees, but it's fascinating. Looking at the hot temperatures, they haven't been increasing. They actually peaked in the many, many decades ago, but it's the cold nighttime temperatures that are increasing. So the very coldest temperature they're warming up significantly. That's a good thing. That's a really, really, really good thing, especially for agriculture. We're seeing that growing seasons are lengthening. If you look going back to 1900, we've documented in the book that the growing season in the continental United States has increased more than 2 weeks. So what's that? It means that we grow more crops, feed more people, killing frosts stop earlier in the spring and arrive later in the fall. And you get this warming turbocharged by increasing CO2. The CO2 fertilization effect is turbocharging plant growth. And then on top of that, we're using nitrogen fertilizer, nitrogenous fertilizers that are derived from fossil fuels. So we get all those three things are the main drivers of increasing agricultural output. It's warming, more CO2, and the use of nitrogen fertilizers. And they want to make all of those. The people promoting this net zero, they want to get rid of nitrogen fertilizers. They want to block the sun using geoengineering, and they want to reduce hugely beneficial CO2 levels. All of this, Dr. Happer and Lenzen in a recent paper came out, they predicted there would be millions of people that die due to famine if they continued and actually furthered their proposals. And we saw what happened in Sri Lanka, which was an agricultural-based economy. When the president of Sri Lanka, President Rajapaksa, actually he banned nitrogen fertilizer, and the entire agricultural system collapsed within 9 months. And that just was a stark reality. And I'm actually I like Sri Lanka. I was hired just as an offside here back in 1984. I was hired to go to Sri Lanka to explore for star sapphires, which we were going to look for there. They had found some on a plantation that was owned by the President Rajapaksa's niece that got run out on a rail, but we never did make it there. But Sri Lanka is just a case study what happens if you go down the road of net zero and ban things like nitrogen fertilizer.
You did say he actually had to flee the country, right?
Oh yeah. They assaulted. They took over the presidential palace, and he barely got out with his skin intact. He fled to India, and so yeah, it was. They're back to using nitrogen fertilizer. Of course, they're best known for their tea and also their star sapphires. And just to get another side note, if your wife loves the deep blue sapphires of a star sapphire, those are called Burmese blue sapphires. They're beautiful. The Sri Lankan sapphires are called Sri Lankan grays. They're just not a very attractive gray color, but if you heat them up in a crucible, they turn a brilliant blue, and they're indistinguishable from the Burmese blues. So most of the sapphires originated from this kind of an ugly gray sapphire, and then were heat treated later. And there's no telling between the two.
I did not know any of
You
that.
never thought we would talk about sapphires on this interview, but there we are.
I wonder how they heat them up. Probably not using solar energy, right?
And I don't think so. I'm not sure. I don't know, but they do heat them up.
So I was going to ask, in the geology world, I don't know if you're still much connected with that, or do you see a lot of talk about climate? I would guess that since they know the history of warm and cold periods, that they're not all in on the climate scam.
Yeah, but a lot of these geological societies have been taken over by the woke crowd that are pushing the largest society promoting petroleum geologists is the American Association of Petroleum Geologists, and their leadership was taken over over the last several years by the people promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, environmental, social, and governance, ESG. They started pushing, instead of oil and gas exploration, they started pushing carbon capture and sequestration as what we should be doing with our organization. And I'm fighting back. We're talking about me being one of the keynote speakers for their annual convention. We'll see if that actually happens. But we will be at that convention as an exhibitor with our big pull-up banner and signs that say we love CO2 and so should you. We proudly proclaim the benefits of more carbon dioxide. I don't think we'll get kicked out of that convention, although we were kicked out in March of this year by the National Science Teaching Association at their annual meeting. They had 14,000 people in attendance. We had paid for a double booth, and the second day we were there, and we were warmly welcomed with our educational materials. We had just distributed the last of our lesson plans and the books that we bought free to the teachers. And they came down and they said that we had to remove our materials. It was called Challenging the NSTA's Position Statement on Climate Change, where we took what they promote for climate change and just destroyed it. They just showed what they're actually about. The National Science Teaching Association and the other groups promoting education in America, they promote groupthink and indoctrination of the students into this climate cult. They absolutely censor any science that goes against that. That's not the scientific method. That's not how critical thinking should be developed. So we did this, and they didn't like it. They came down with 3 armed security, and said, "You need to leave." And so I'm there. We had the only group there that had some really distinguished sciences. I had 3 women, ladies. Not that it matters what their gender is, but they were female. All had PhDs. One was top nanotechnology expert in the world, and they're booting us out because they didn't like our science, and we left with our heads held high. It was really a dark stain on that organization, and it was. We've gone to more education conferences. We're planning. We're not going to get back into that one again. They won't allow us, I'm sure. I might just apply just to tweak them, but we're looking and looking homeschools groups. We're identifying 5 or 6 of the big homeschool conferences. We'll be putting on a workshop in Pennsylvania in 2 months at the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference. So we want to get that out, get our message, education materials, and we want to promote, again, critical thinking skills and the scientific method.
So don't you think it's a common repeated thing that's happening, that the warmists have captured just a handful of people at the top of organizations, but the rank and file, if you were to poll them, are we experiencing a climate crisis? They would say, of course not.
Exactly. We saw that at the NSTA conference, and we've seen it at other education conferences where the teachers are just thirsty for the information we provide. We've taken on this in North Carolina. One of our members there actually got the scientific method included in the North Carolina science standards after it was removed some 30 years ago, believe it or not. We took on the Texas Public Policy Foundation came to us because of our expertise. They said, we need help going over the textbooks that are being used for science. And we put an all hands on deck effort that we'd short time. We did that. We looked at the textbooks, and through the Texas Public Policy Foundation, they went and fought, and we had several books that were banned that were not going to be used at all because they were just awful. And we had other changes that were made through our recommendations. So we're not just out there with some fun looking books. We're actually doing something in states to make a difference. And it's really the state level where we need to make those changes with education. We'll do it state by state. It's really uplifting though to see so many teachers. They just love what we're being able to provide. We're also actually providing CO2 meters at no cost to teachers. These are $180 a piece. If they can provide a good use for it, we have experiments that can be done in the lesson plans that require a CO2 meter. We're going to go ahead and do that. So yeah, we've got all these tentacles going out trying to spread the good news of the gospel of more CO2. And it's been uplifting. It's been busy as heck.
So overall, do you think over the years that you've been doing this, that you're making headway and there's more people who understand the whole climate realist position? I do.
Absolutely. I am a huge optimist. I see it. I've been saying it for the last several years. I say, we're winning. You may not feel like it, but we are winning. I see it almost maybe not every day, but every week I see more evidence. And I just talk to random people people at a restaurant or in the airport, whatever. I'm like, what do you do? And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm an author. I'm executive director of the CO2 Coalition. Oh, and we start talking. And they're like, their eyes get wide, and they have no idea about anything what I'm telling them. But again, just almost every person I talk to a man and woman, are thirsty for this information. It's just a matter of getting it out there. We're silenced, we're censored. You know that, you are too. That they need to silence us because we make sense, and we're using science. We're not flailing, waving our arms, and we're not marching in the streets. We're providing the science, and that's what we do here at the CO2 Coalition. We stay away from the politics as best we can and stick to the science. And I think that adds credibility to our efforts. I just had lunch with some other leaders of other groups, and they're more activist, and there's a place for all of us here. So we stay away from the activism per se, but we give them the facts, the science, and the data for them to go forward.
So I have a couple examples here of how I think you've been censored, and I want to get an update on that. First off, you were banned from LinkedIn, I think, for posting facts. And then the other one is that your Inconvenient Facts app is still not available at the Apple App Store. Am I correct there?
Correct. It was just removed again.
Okay. Are you censored on any other platforms? Because like on Twitter, I think things are, from my perspective, are going well. We're not being censored.
Well, we're being shadow banned for sure on Facebook. Twitter seems to be good. Thank you, Elon. So Twitter's good. We're getting out there. YouTube. It's hard to say how much we're being shadow banned or restricted. We have videos now that we're promoting. We talked a little bit before about this new video effort. It's called the Climate Chronicles. We're trying to get that out there, and we're trying to do more social media. In fact, I'm looking for a third person to add to that portfolio of our staff. We're bringing on third-party contractors for digital marketing and digital advertising. We're looking at all options to get our message out there. But I have people tell me, they said, man, I said, everywhere I go and I look up climate change, there's somebody from the CO2 Coalition, or they're quoting you or somebody, or Will Happer or Patrick Moore. So we're getting the word out there. We're being more successful in outreach. We just need to do more. And I got to praise you, Tom, for the work that you're doing here. Of course, you had quite if you just went down the list of our members, you have quite a few members that are fascinating and highly educated and degreed, some of the top, most respected scientists in the world. But you're doing a great service with what you're doing with your podcast.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide an update here. I just counted, by my count this morning, 26 people, CO2 Coalition people, have been on my podcast. And I just have to go down the list and get some more on there. So many interesting people. Yeah.
It is. And you get people like Patrick Moore. Not every scientist can communicate on a level that the non-scientist can understand. Patrick Moore in particular is one of those he's fascinating. He's got a story being original co-founder of Greenpeace. So when he talks, people listen and respect him. The same with many of the others in your neck of the woods, with some of the top fire experts in the world. So, whatever your subject matter is, we have an economists that are top, fire experts that are the top, climatologists. We're completing a study right now on CO2 and nutrition. There's been a troubling advance. The alarmists now are starting to say, or have been for several years, that, well, because they can't deny that CO2 is encouraging plant growth and crop growth. That's beyond argument. It just is. What they're saying is, well, we're growing more plants, but they're less nutritious. And the protein, there's not as much protein, blah, blah. And so there's not been a study done. We're doing it right now. It's led by Dr. Will Happer and Albrecht Gletzel, who's from Paraguay. The two of them are leading this. We have a small team we put together. What's actually happening as you increase CO2, what happens to the nutritional value of the corn, the wheat, the alfalfa, whatever it is you're growing? What happens? And so Dr. Happer's insistent that paper be done before we go to Wyoming in a couple of weeks. So we'll have a couple of new papers that are coming out that are important. One on Wyoming, and this other one on CO2 and nutrition. I think it'll be hugely impactful for us to say, not only is CO2 driving plant growth, we're getting more of it, and it's still nutritious.
So you must be keeping really busy personally, doing all this stuff, running this organization and the papers, and 300 interviews last year and 6 today. Is that right?
Yeah. We're being driven. Yes. Yeah. So it's, and I know you're the same way. I love talking to people. I love communicating, and that's, take your strengths and build on those. So yeah, am I busy? Heck yeah. I don't think I've had a day off in a couple of years, but I love doing what I'm doing. I worked all this past weekend on this Wyoming paper. It's what I love to do. And I get a real charge out of when you finally get this together. It's a great feeling. Especially we'll be talking, we're taking a coal tour of the largest coal mine in the world, and then traveling on one day, and then traveling to a large coal generating electricity facility for a field trip there. That evening, we're going to be talking to the Gillette Community College. This will be Will Happer and Byron Sepoyan and myself. Then we travel. We're having a press conference in the Capitol Rotunda, and I can't tell you everything we're doing that day. We'll end up the next day, University of Wyoming at Laramie, where the Turning Point USA student chapter there is hosting us, where we'll give an hour-long presentation. And I understand they like Jimmy John's subs, so we'll be to draw the students in. We'll be providing a free lunch, and I just shipped them a full box of 40 of my new book as a freebie to get more people to come out. So yeah, we're keeping busy. It's been fun.
So it sounds like you have a close relationship with Will Happer. I see he did an excellent foreword to your book. I'm loving the straight talk in there. Yeah.
Will is I have the utmost respect for Will. He's a true gentleman, and he amazes me when we talk. Just as an example, I think it was a year ago, I told him, I said, I forget exactly how it came up. I said, well, I think it might have been 2 years ago. I said, I'm rereading Atlas Shrugged. And I said, it's amazing. I said, as I'm reading this, things in America are actually doing what's happening now, what was in Atlas Shrugged. And he said, oh, Greg, what a coincidence. I'm also reading Atlas Shrugged. I'm reading it in the original Russian version, though. Who reads Atlas Shrugged in Russian? Will Happer does. And he comes up. I don't know where he's, and his energy is boundless. He just spent 10 days in Paraguay with Albert Gletzel. They're fighting back against net zero in Paraguay. And in fact, after his visit, the Paraguayan delegation voted against the resolution at the COP28 meeting. And we'd like to think he had something to do with that. He spent 10 days touring Australia, speaking several months ago in 5 cities across Australia. And he's tireless, but he's a true scientist, scholar, and a gentleman in the old sense of the word.
Yeah, very, very impressive guy. So we're coming up maybe on 45 minutes or so. Do you have any other points you'd like to make before I let you go to all your other interviews?
Well, we've got the book itself, A Very Convenient Warming. If you can buy it directly from my website. It just went up available on Facebook a couple of days ago. The website I have is convenientwarming.com, convenientwarming.com. To learn more about the CO2 Coalition, go to co2coalition.org and go to our educational materials. I'm going to throw a lot of things out here, but the education materials, if you want to look at that, it's co2learningcenter.com, co2learningcenter.com. You can order our 3. We've got 2 more new books coming out. The book that the kids really like is called Simon the Solar Powered Cat. It's about a cat, and it's about photosynthesis, and it's fascinating. The kids just love it. And again, there are lesson plans that go along with that.
Very good. All right, I will let you go, but thanks again, Gregory Wrightstone. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you very much.